Any distractions here at MIX, being in Vegas, that I'm sure you all want to go out and enjoy food, gambling, all sorts of other things. All right, so I want to get started by talking about a user experience that I find a little bit troubling. It's probably something that everybody in this room has seen once or more times in their lives. It's MySpace user pages. Oh, wait a minute, I have to go back to the beginning here. MySpace user pages. And the reason that I find them troubling is because users are free to customize the heck out of these pages. They can do anything they want to them. In effect, at times that can be very useful, but a good majority of times it can make them pretty unusable. We're looking at Borat's page here, in case you didn't realize that. And it's very visually distracting. It's not very aesthetically pleasing. A bigger problem, though, is that it's actually very difficult to find the information that you might want to interact with, such as I like to look at people's education, and there's some details that are typically down at the bottom. On this particular page, he's got lots of junk in the way. It's really hard to find. It's also really hard to find the comment section. Another problem is, especially in this particular case, it's really hard to find where you navigate to other aspects of MySpace. Borat has customized those links. They are the links here. I'm going to highlight them with my mouse. So they're completely unreadable. They're also very, very small and hard to target. I became really frustrated with MySpace quite a while ago and canceled my MySpace page. Shortly thereafter, I discovered Facebook. I really like Facebook. Facebook is clean, it's simple, it's got all the right features and functionality. It's consistent when I'm interacting on my page. It's consistent when I'm interacting on my friends' pages. I know where to go to find the features and the functionality that I want to interact with. It's overall just a really engaging experience. And this is the kind of experience that you want for your business applications. You want to ensure that your users can find the information that they need to interact with, pull out meaningful data from that information to perform actions that are necessary in their jobs. You want to limit the number of errors that your users are going to encounter when interacting with your UI. You want to ensure that they can be as productive as possible, fast and efficient when interacting with your UI. You want to limit support and training costs, and you really want your users to enjoy the user experience of your application. I don't know if any of you guys have ever experienced this, but there are some applications that I've interacted with where I want to pick up my computer and I want to check it out the window. I get so frustrated. You don't want your users to feel that way. You want them to enjoy working with the application. Even for a business application, this is important. And good design can help ensure you can do this. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I have a clicker, so I'm going to use it. All right, so I'm Karina Black. I'm a user experience designer at Microsoft. And I'm going to be talking about user experience design patterns for business applications using Microsoft Silverlight 3. I'm going to start by talking about, or I'm probably not going to start, I'm actually not going to start by talking about design patterns, but I will touch on design patterns. Obviously, that's very important for this presentation. I'm going to touch a little bit on design attributes. These are the qualities of an application that really make it more usable than it might be otherwise, more engaging, make your users want to use the application. These include properties such as color, iconography, typography, animations, and transitions. These kind of attributes can really affect the mood that your application evokes from users. It can be very beneficial to take advantage of these. Of course, I'm going to touch on implementing design patterns in Silverlight 3. But before I get started, I want to very quickly go over the 7 core design principles, because these are the foundation of really good design, and of course, really good design patterns, or design patterns, period. Starting with simplicity. Simplicity is all about removing all of the extraneous information, visuals, features, and functionality from the application interface so your users can focus on what's most important and complete the tasks that they need to complete. I'm going to be fast here. Visibility is about ensuring that all of the information that your users need to interact with is highly visible on the page. If it's hidden, users aren't going to know it exists. They're not going to interact with it. Metaphor allows your users to take what they learn in the real world and leverage it when they're interacting with your application interface. A good example of this is the Vista desktop. Many of us have interacted with desktops in real life, and it's pretty natural and intuitive to interact with the Vista desktop and leverage what you know from real life. It can be very beneficial, help users understand how to interact with your application much more quickly than they might otherwise. Natural mappings also leverages users' intuitions. Items that are similarly sized, similarly positioned, or grouped together, of similar shape and color. Oftentimes users assume that these have similar functionality, and it can actually speed users' interactions if you take advantage of natural mappings in your UI. Constraints is about ensuring that users go down the right path when they're interacting with your application. You want them to be fast and efficient. You want them to be able to perform the tasks that they need to perform and be as productive as possible. Constraints can help you do that. I'm not moving my little mouse thing here, so my little arrow, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right. So error prevention is twofold. There are errors where users make a mistake when they're interacting with your UI. I don't know if you guys do this, but I actually do this a lot because of my mouse pad. I'll accidentally grab a folder in Outlook and drag it to the trash, and thank goodness that Outlook says, hey, are you sure you want to do this? And it lets me kind of back out of that. Another type of errors that users encounter, when I'm coding in Visual Studio, I'll oftentimes go down a path, and I'll realize, I want to go back to where I was 5 minutes ago. And if your application makes it so you can actually go back, it's very beneficial. There's an undo stack, obviously, in Visual Studio. Consistency is about ensuring that the structure of your application, the visuals in your application are consistent from page to page or section to section in your UI. You don't want your users to have to learn how to interact on one page and then relearn how to interact on another page. That is a complete productivity loss, and you want to avoid that if at all possible. All right, so those are the core design principles. Again, the foundation of really good design and really good design and design patterns. Really good design patterns too. What are design patterns? Design patterns are a proven set of rules tested in the real world and used to obtain excellence in a field. Yes, I just did read that. But they also, design patterns don't only apply to user experience, they apply to other fields as well. I'm sure many of you in this room are familiar with design patterns in software engineering. There's design patterns for architecture. For software engineering, they're used to obtain really simple, clean, fast, elegant code. In architecture, they might be used to obtain beautiful or sublime buildings. And in user experience design, they're used to obtain very consistent, clean, simple, engaging user interfaces. They're building blocks that you can use to create great experiences for your users so they can just kind of intuit what to do when they're interacting with your UI and be as productive as possible. So design patterns come in many forms, from the very, very high level, application design patterns such as social networking applications, their desktop applications, of course, business applications, all the way down to the very, very low level design patterns such as a radio button design pattern. I'm going to be talking today about many different design patterns and for business applications, and I'm going to bucket them into these 5 buckets: orientation, navigation, input, analysis, and action. All right, so what is orientation about? Patterns that fit into this category are focused on the structure of the application, ensuring that navigation is in a consistent location that users can always find. Branding is in a consistent location from page to page. Key features and functionality are in a consistent location to speed your users' interaction with your application. Navigation is about clearly identifying the paths, the tasks that users can complete in your application, as well as helping them actually go down those various paths. Some specific patterns that fit into this bucket include breadcrumbs, and this is clear entry points that we're seeing here from the Blend startup screen. That's another pattern that fits into the navigation bucket. Another bucket is input, patterns that fit into the input category. Include constrained controls. Examples of these are date pickers that basically tell your user or help ensure your users are entering the date in the correct format for the system. Combo boxes, autocomplete boxes, and the list can go on. They also include features such as what you're seeing here in this screenshot. This is inline error help. So in this case, the user has entered or deleted information that was required by the system, and the UI is saying, hey, you need this information, and it's guiding them as to how to resolve the error that they've encountered. Analysis patterns are focused on ensuring that your users can find the information that they need in the application to pull out meaningful key takeaways and data. Some examples of patterns, specific patterns that fit into the analysis category include charts and graphing. There are also filtering, sorting, and row grouping functionalities that you might find in data grids. The action category is focused on patterns that help users understand what the next step to take is in a user interface, or how to complete a task that they're working on in a user interface. Patterns in this category are progress indicators, grouped buttons, a very distinct I'm done button in a user interface. All right, so those are the high-level design patterns, and I'm going to go into implementing some of those design patterns here in a moment. Of course, I'm not going to cover them all. There's just not enough time. I'm going to focus on the ones that are specific in Silverlight 3 for business applications. But before I do that, I want to touch a little bit on design attributes. Again, these are the qualities of an application that can really make the user experience fun, engaging, and even more usable than it might be otherwise. And can evoke, another example of what they can do is they can evoke moods from your users. They can make your branding really, really pop for your organization. They can actually suit the style of your users better. So this is an example. These screenshots that you're seeing here are a sample application that I worked on a while ago for a WPF sample. Exact same features and functionality. Two entirely different moods that these evoke from people when they're looking at them. The reason is because I'm using different colors, different topography, different iconography. One's very light and bubbly and fun. The other one is a little dark and sinister, especially since the poor little bird lost its feathers and they're falling to the bottom of the application. It's really kind of sad. But you can see these, this stuff can really affect the user experience of your application. This is important to take into consideration. And Silverlight does help you do this. This is actually, I'm going to try to link to this site. Hopefully it'll work. Another important set of properties in the attributes section of this presentation include effects and animation. Effects and animation can also greatly improve the user experience of your application. They can make it way more engaging, and they can help users. In the case here, let's see if this works. In the case here, it can really help you. Oh, geez, it's so. The resolution's so low. But you can see, as the data's loading, you're seeing, so this is about obesity in the United States, and as the data's loading, you're seeing the shirts get bigger, and I can step back in time, and you can see interactively how the information has been changing over time. It's a great way for people to be able to pull out meaningful information, and it's really fun. All right, so that was a little bit about design attributes. Let's jump into the nitty-gritty and start implementing some of these design patterns. So to do this, I'm going to build this application that you're seeing here. This is an expense application. It will allow users to create expense reports, to view and modify in-progress expense reports, and to view approvals, those expense reports that have been approved by their manager. I'm actually not going to code every little detail of this application, but in the end, we'll end up with an application that looks exactly like this, and we'll be able to walk through it and interact with it. All right, so let's get to talking about the specific design patterns that are supported by Silverlight 3. The first set that I would like to talk about are focused on orientation. And these include visual and interaction framework, dynamic layout, global navigation, and skinnable UX. I also want to call out that I have highlighted the principles, the pattern categories, as well as some of the attributes that you'll be seeing here. And of course, I'll be talking about them, but I'm not going to necessarily cover every detail. So if you want to reference that, that'll be there for your reference. All right, so why is visual and interaction framework important? It is part of the orientation category, and it helps your users understand how to interact with the page, know where the global navigation is, the branding is. It also provides a consistent look and feel across the application interface. It's very comforting for users. It helps them be more productive. Dynamic layout has to do with, it's important because you don't necessarily know the form factor that your users are going to be interacting with your application on. Could be a very high resolution, could be a very low resolution. If it's a low resolution, ideally you want to ensure that the user experience is still going to be usable. You don't want scroll bars appearing everywhere and users having to work around the scroll bars. It can be very difficult. So you want to try to ensure that the UI can dynamically scale to ensure that it's as usable as possible for users of various sorts. Global navigation is important because it, as I had mentioned previously, it identifies the feature. Basically, it helps the users identify the tasks that they can complete in your application. It's very often, it should be in a very prominent and consistent location within the application to help orient users and help them navigate to the various tasks that they're going to need to complete. And then skinnable UX. So skinnable UX is basically taking advantage of some of those attributes that I had just talked about. It can allow you to quickly customize the visual appearance of your UI to suit either branding needs or the specific style needs of your user. And so let's take a look at this. All right. So the patterns, these patterns are supported in the new Silverlight 3 navigation template. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and create a new Silverlight project. I'm going to select the Silverlight navigation template. Go ahead and leave it as Silverlight application 1. It's loading the project. I'm just going to go ahead and run it. Try that one more time. All right, so this is the UI you get by default when you utilize the new navigation template in Silverlight 3. It provides some features and functionality right out of the box. There's navigation built in. So as you can see, I can navigate from home page to the about page. It's taking advantage of that visual and interaction framework pattern that I had mentioned. Branding is in a consistent location. Navigation is in a consistent location. The colors are consistent throughout the various pages in the site, and it's very easy to navigate through them. It's also taking advantage of dynamic layout by default. Sure, this is a simple UI, but there are ways to actually take this further and more complex UIs as well. As you can see, it's nicely scaling. And global navigation, as I just mentioned, is in a consistent location. So let's quickly take a look at how I can skin this UI to provide an entirely different look and feel very quickly. So in this template, all of the resources are in app.xaml. They could very well be in an external resource dictionary, but they are all encompassed in one location, and I can easily swap them out. So let's go ahead and do that. And I have snippets to help me be a little bit more productive in what I'm doing here. So I'll just drop this snippet onto the page, rerun my application. Again, I'm simply changing all of the resources in app.xaml. And the UI is entirely different. And I'm going to do it one more time just to kind of drive it home a little harder. I think this is fun. I love it. Hitting F5 again. Navigation is going to be positioned entirely differently. The whole look and feel of this application is going to be entirely differently. And all I did is change the resources in app.xaml. Boom. All right. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go into Blend, and I want to show you how to add some additional patterns to this navigation template very easily. The first pattern that I'm going to talk about is, I call it the I am here pattern. It's basically indicating in the global navigation which page you're on very clearly and prominently. And then I'm just going to add some navigation transitions very, very quickly. So I'm going to move over to Blend. And let's talk about some of the differences that you're seeing here. I have, in this UI, I've dropped in a slightly different set of resources in the app.xaml. I've added a background graphic. I've added a new page. And of course, I've changed the name of the pages in the UI. But it was as simple as that. All right, so to add the I am here pattern, that's my name, I'm going to go into the individual page. I'm going to add it to the create page. Bring up my create page. And select my layout route. I'm going to add a rectangle. Pop over to my properties. I'm going to size my rectangle to 60 by 30. I'm going to orient it top and left. I'm going to give it negative margins, negative 22 on the left and a negative 69 on the top. I'll scroll over so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to remove the background fill that's provided in Rectangle by default. I'm also going to pick for the border color a resource that I specified in my app.xaml file. I want the page link color here, but I want to slightly modify it. So if I flip back to the color picker, it's going to give me the same color, but I can change the opacity. I could very well add this to the resources too, but I'm not going to do that right now. So let's just take a look at what we have. Building. All right, so I hope you guys can see. Hopefully you can see that. That's the I am here pattern. I'm going to quickly add a navigated transition, and then I'll navigate through the pages so we can take a closer look at things. But this stuff's super fun. All right, so what I want to do on my navigation transition is I want my content to go from 0 opacity to 100% opacity, and I want it to kind of slide in a little bit. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm on my create page. I'm anal, so I'm going to move my rectangle up where I want it in my objects and timeline tree. Select my stack panel. By default, I'm going to set my stack panel to 0 opacity in the Properties tool window. I'm going to go to the States tool window. I'm going to add a common state group. I'm going to add a state called loaded. Oh, geez. Loaded. And then I'm going to create the animation for this. I'm going to add a keyframe at time 0. I'm going to go out and add a keyframe at time 0.5 seconds. 0.5 seconds, I want the opacity to be 100%. At time 0, its opacity is 0%, which is exactly what I wanted. And I want the transform, I want it to kind of slide in, so I'm going to move it down on the y-axis at time 0 to 40. And I'm going to also take advantage of some of the cool new easing functions. I'm going to set an easing function, an ease-in function, I guess that's what you call it, ease-in function at time 0, and another one at time 5. And let's go ahead and build this and take a look at what we have. Oh, I goofed. I forgot to actually hook it up on load. So let me do that real quickly. This is actually really easy. I'm going to go to the Events tab in the Properties tool window from my page. Go to my base state. I'm going to go to the Loaded event. Do animation. Blend now lets me edit code in Blend, which I love. I'm going to do Visual State Manager dot go to state this loaded and true to do the animation or the transition. All right, now I can build and you'll see the animation, I promise. Ta-da! All right, and I already hooked it up in the other pages, so when I navigate between the pages, you're seeing the I am here as well as the navigated transition, or the navigation transition. All right, so let's go back to the slides and let's talk about not that, let's talk about the pattern of alternating row stripes and sorting. These are provided by default in DataGrid. These are part of the analysis pattern group that I had mentioned. They help users scan the data in a data grid. They also help them pull out meaningful information, as you'll see. So I'm just going to go back to Blend. And let's add a data grid to my in-progress page. I'm going to go to the asset library. I'm going to select my data grid, Control, select the stack panel that I want to add the data grid control to, double click it. I'm going to set the height on my data grid to 300 pixels, tall. I'm also, so I can see what I'm doing, for now, I'm going to set the opacity on the stack panel to 100%. And so Blend actually allows me to add data as a designer by myself within Blend, so it makes me a lot more fast and efficient. So I'm going to show you this great new functionality. I'm going to go over to the Datas tab. I'm going to select my application because I want this data to be available to the entire application. I want it to be available at runtime as well. Blend is going to generate sample data for me to work with. I'm going to go into my collection. So this is an expense application. Let's say that I want to track the name of the individual who's creating the expense. I want a description of the expense. I want to track the cost, the ID, the cost center, and let's just say that's it. So I'm going to add 4 properties to work with for now. Name. Description. Let's see what else. Let's just do cost, center, and date. I want date. And Blend allows me to actually specify how I want the data generated, which is super cool. So I'm going to have my cost center be an integer, a number. I want it to be 4 characters long or 4 integers long. I want my description, it can be lorem ipsum text. My cost center I just looked at. My date, I want it to actually be a date, and Blend will do that for me. How cool is that? I want names to be real names, so Blend will do that for me as well. And I want the data set to be, let's say, 100 items. So I can specify that. Now all I need to do is hook it up to my data grid. So I'm just going to drag and drop the collection on my data grid. Boom. And so now I'm going to run it, and we'll take a look at some of these patterns that are built into the data grid. How easy was that, though? As a designer, I'm able to get the data into my UI. I don't have to rely on the developer. I can be as productive as possible and start designing the UI. So we're seeing the alternating row striping, which is helping you scan the data more effectively and efficiently from left to right. There's also sorting built into the data grid by default. I wish the name column had filled in. For some reason it didn't, because I would like to know who's been spending the most in my organization. this past month, then this would allow me to do it, or see who's been submitting the most expense reports. So it's allowing me to take away meaningful data that might be difficult to obtain otherwise. All right, so back to the slides. I keep going the wrong way. All right, so the next pattern that I'd like to look at is expandable panels. This is part of the orientation and navigation categories that we were discussing previously. It helps users orient themselves within the UI. It will also, depending on how you implement them, allow users to actually navigate the UI. It can reduce the cognitive load for users because they're expandable and collapsible. So when they're collapsed, there's less information on the page. It's simplifying the UI for users to kind of have to digest and work with. They can really focus in on what they want. They can expand the information that they want and just deal with that. So it can be very beneficial for users and speed the productivity. So Silverlight 3 supports this functionality in the data grid, and I'm going to show you that. I'm not going to actually code the whole thing up, but I'm going to show you, what's going on and how it works. There are also, in the Silverlight toolkit, there's an accordion control, an expander, and a tree view control that work in a similar manner. And let's go ahead and take a look at this in action. All right. So what we have here, what we're looking at, is we're looking at the in-progress page that you saw just a moment ago when I was running the UI. I've added a data grid, and I'm just going to run through some of the properties that have been set here so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on. I've set the height to 263. It's also in a grid, to get that layout that we want and oriented properly. The item source is set to data that I have in app.xaml, so it can be available to the entire application. You can auto-generate the UI, which we saw in Blend, or the columns and the data that appears in the data grid. Or you can say, no, I want to handle it myself, and that's what I'm doing. I'm setting it to false so I can handle it myself. And I'm setting some other visual properties and hooking up to styles in the data grid, which is very easy to do. The way that I specify the group headers for the expandable and collapsible regions in the data grid is by utilizing this group descriptions tag. And then I want the property expense date to be the grouping element. Down here, I've chosen to only expose expense name as the item that you can expand and collapse by group date. And so let's go ahead and run it and take a look at what we have. Come on, work with me. Faster. It's coming. My machine's not happy with me right now. I need to do something to it. It really doesn't like me, as you can tell. Now's when we need music. We need something. All right, there it is. All right, so we have our navigation transition. So I've done very simple to specify the row grouping in my data grid. I've added, obviously, some additional styling so it can fit the UI that we're going to end up with in the end. Users can easily expand and collapse this information. It's great. It can be very useful. So let's go ahead and go back to the slides and take a look at the next pattern to help us build our great business application UI. The pattern is paging. Paging is part of the orientation and navigation categories of patterns. Part of orientation because when it's associated with the data grid, it actually can show you where you are within the collection, so it's orienting you, letting you know that you're on page 1 of 6 pages in a collection of items. And navigation, of course, because it'll allow you to navigate that collection. And I've highlighted what it looks like here. I'm going to use the other mouse. On screen, as you can see. The Silverlight 3 feature that supports paging is known as Data Pager, so let's just go in and take a look at adding it. And I'm going to add it. I'm just going to collapse my data grid, because that's exactly how I want it to be. I'm going to go down and add my, just drag and drop my data pager snippet in place. And I need a namespace up at the top. So I'm going to add the namespace for my data pager. Go back down to my pager, and let's just talk about some of the properties that we're seeing here. I can specify the page size. So I want, in this particular case, I'm specifying that I want 6 items to appear on a page. I can also customize the display mode. There are 6 options to choose from. I can do previous next. Let's just take a look at previous next or previous next numeric. Stick with previous next and go ahead and run it so you can take a look at what we have. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to mention that's important, and I'll mention it as this is running. So the data that the data pager is associated with is the exact same as it is for the data grid, and it's a paged collection which allows me to page that information. And so this is what the data pager looks by default with this particular display mode set. It's allowing me to see that I have 3 pages of information. There are 6 items per page. I can navigate them very quickly. I can choose, like, hey, I want to go back to page 1 because there was something that I want there. I can very quickly navigate back by entering page 1 in the text input box. It can be very useful navigating a collection, orienting yourself within the collection, knowing how many items there are in the collection. What I want to do now, though, is I want to customize the appearance of my data pager so it fits better with my UI. So I've created a style, and let's just run it and take a look. The style, of course, is an app.xaml. So I have a data pager UI. It was actually very easy to style. I just don't have enough time to show you guys all the details. That fits nicely with my UI, and I can navigate the items in the collection just as before. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next item, which is master details. All right, so master details also fits into the orientation and the navigation categories. It's part of the orientation category because it can show all of the items in the collection in one pane in the UI, and then specific details for a selected item in another pane in the UI. So it orients users. They can see all the information that's available to them, know where they might want to go to access a specific information or to complete a specific task. It's part of navigation because they can navigate all that information in one UI. They're not jumping around from page to page. And data form and data grid combined together very simply support this pattern. Go ahead and add that. All right, so I'm going to add a data form. We have our data grid, which is going to act as the master. And I am going to simply drag in a data form control, and let's take a look at what we have. Right now, I'm setting auto-generate fields to true. It's going to generate the UI for me that users can interact with. I'm also binding, like I had mentioned with the data pager, to the exact same data as I'm bound to for the data grid. And when I run it, it opens super fast. If I go over, it's because of my computer. All right. So this is the master, like I'd mentioned, the data grid, and it's driving the information that's displayed in my data form. Data form comes by default with some controls that allow you to navigate the collection. As you're seeing here, I'm navigating the items, and the data grid is updating to show where I am within the collection. It's nicely formatting all of the information, in the data set. There is a problem with this item and this item, though, and that data grid or data form doesn't know how to present the information. It's because it's another collection. So we'll get into that, fixing that in a moment. And go back to our slides. All right, so the next set of patterns that we're going to look at are edit, add, and delete. Now, these are important because they allow users to be fast and efficient when interacting with forms, information that they need to enter into the system. And both data form and data grid support these patterns. We're going to take a look specifically at data form right now. So back to our UI. By default, data form is not in auto edit mode. The user has to flip it over to auto edit mode, and there's an icon up here that allows me to do that. So I'm in edit mode now, and I can edit this information. I get an error. I can delete items from the collection. You'll see that the data grid's actually updating. It's allowing me to quickly flip, I'm interacting with a form. I can quickly flip over into edit mode, modify things. I don't have to go to a new page. I can do it all in line. In this particular case, it doesn't make sense to add items because I would do that in the create page, but data form would support that as well. In this particular part of the UI, it does make sense to delete items, and of course, data form, as you see, supports that as well. These patterns all help your users be faster and more efficient when interacting with the UI, more productive, and this is very important. All right, so you kind of saw this already. My thunder is stolen. Not that it was thunder anyway. But so the next set of patterns is inline error indicators and error summary. So why are these important? They're part of the input category. If your users happen to go down the wrong path when they're interacting with your UI, it's very important to alert them to problems. I mean, if the data, if the database isn't going to accept input in some format that it doesn't want to accept, you need to alert your users to that fact. You don't want them to submit the form and then have some extraneous error message pop back. They don't know where to go to fix the errors. It's great to actually present that error information in line, help your users be efficient and productive. So let's take a look at that. We already did a little bit, but again, provided out of the box in data form, out of the box, so to speak. So in this case, if I delete this information that's required, tab away, I get both an error summary that will navigate me to the issue that has the error. Very, very strong visuals indicating that, hey, there's an error that you need to fix. And red is actually pretty important in this case. There was a recent study done by the University of British Columbia, I hope I'm saying that right, where they found that red actually helps people focus in on tasks. It makes them really pay attention because it's kind of like, whoa, red, I gotta focus in. So, when there's an error case, you want your users to focus in on the issue and resolve the problem. Red is a great color for that. The inline error indicators are great for that as well. And then, of course, this error summary that, would, let's say that they had scrolled down a big long page. It will help them navigate up to the specific issue that they want to fix. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so the next set of specific design patterns that fit into the input category I want to talk about are patterns that help constrain the types of input that your users can input into the system. This is helping ensure your users are going down the right path. You don't want them, for instance, like I have a friend in Canada who was saying that she never really knows what format to input in a date picker if it's not, or into a date field if it's not giving her a date picker. So she'll try entering 13/ and see if it throws an error. It tells her that she's doing something wrong to kind of figure out what format it needs. So she's losing productivity. So why not just constrain the type of input that your users can enter into the system in the first place? And some great ways to do this are to utilize date pickers for date input. It will provide a text box users can type into directly, or they can interact with a button that will pop up a calendar and they can pick the date that they want to enter. Formats it properly, the system's happy, everybody's happy. autocomplete text box can be used to tell users what type of information this particular field will take. Same with combo box. Numeric up-down control will constrain the input to numerical data. So some of these controls are in the core runtime. Some are actually part of the Silverlight toolkit. And let's go ahead and take a look at adding some of these constrained controls. I'm going to add autocomplete text box to our data form that you just saw. And I'm also going to, so you saw in the data form that there was a collection of information that the data form didn't know how to render. So I'm going to add a data grid so that that information can be presented in a readable, human-readable format, and one that users can interact with and modify. So I'm going to do those two changes, autocomplete text box and add the data grid. All right. So I'm going to drop in an entirely new data form, if it will let me do it. One that has styles. We'll walk through some of the information so you can see what's going on. All right, so there's a lot of information here. And so again, this is the data form. I'm choosing to not auto-generate the fields now. I'm also pointing to a style, binding to the same data, set some of the other additional visual properties. Because I'm not auto-generating the fields, I need to specify what fields I want data form to display. And that's what I'm doing down here in data form fields, right here. I have a data form field group. I can also specify some layout of the UI very simply using data form field groups and some of the built-in data form controls that we see here, data form text field, data form text field. There's also a data form date picker field. What I'm going to do, though, is I have my autocomplete text box commented out. I'm simply going to uncomment it, delete the field that was there rendering that information previously. This is for cost center and for, what am I doing? Cost center and date. Uncomment cost center, delete the cost center field here. I need to add a namespace for controls. Where am I? And then I need to also add a reference, so bear with me a moment here. To Windows, System Windows Controls Input. And that will resolve in a moment. So on load, in the code behind, I'm going to specify the information that actually will appear in the drop-down box for the autocomplete text box. So I'm going to go to the code behind file very quickly here and add my code. And I probably added it in the wrong place. So this is what's going on here. If the object that it's going to provide the drop-down information for happens to be the autocomplete text box for date, it's going to pop in the dates. If it's for cost center ID, it's going to pop in the 2 cost center IDs that this organization allows for cost centers. So now I'm going to go ahead and run it so you can take a peek. Oh, wait, I'm going to add the data grid. Data grid. All right, so this data grid is going to bind to the expense items PVC collection, which was part of that Uber expense collection, which is an app.xaml. And if I run it, you'll see that that strange, funky text box full of funky information now renders as a data grid. So we have it rendering as a data grid, much more usable. We also have our autocomplete text box, which is helping users know what sort of information the system is going to accept. It's It's a lot more helpful, helps your users be more productive and efficient. So one thing I also want to call out is data grid by default. Like you could actually, I kind of mentioned that it has inline error capabilities and an error summary as well. I'll show you the inline error capabilities. It's also editable, so I can edit in the data grid. I don't think it's efficient to edit in a data grid in many cases, especially if there's like reams and reams of columns. Not necessarily, that's not necessarily the case here, but it can be in many cases. So a data, like actually rendering that information in a data form is going to make your users much more efficient when updating the information in the collection. So here, let me just show you inline error information in the data grid. This is all provided by default. Cancel. And let's go back and have data form present the data grid information. I'm going to uncomment my data form. Data form is simply bound. Where is my source for data form? Simply bound to the same collection as the data grid, the expense items PCV, as you can see here. And when I run, the data grid is going to be the master. The data form, again, is going to be the details. So we have like two master details going on in here. Master details here, master details here. Are you updating? Yes. And it's fully interactive, just as before. All right. So that was all about constraining input, helping your users do the right thing, enter data correctly the first time into the system. Productivity is really, really important. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is input hints. Input hints, patterns, features that support input hints in Silverlight 3 include the description viewer and the required field indicator. Now, input hints are part of the input category, and they're important because they help your users understand what sort of information the system is expecting. So let's just jump in and take a look. So one of the ways that you can utilize input hints, the description viewer, and required field using some of the new controls in Silverlight 3 is to actually attribute the data collection or the business object, depending on what you're doing. So I'm going to open, I have a CLR object for my collection here. And so I'm going to get rid of all these required field indicators so you can see what that does. That's simply an attribute on the data. I'm also going to uncomment some of these, some of this metadata so you can see what effect this has on the UI. So in data form, it will look for this metadata, this display, category, this description. Let's just add two bangs here. And render it, as you will see here in a moment. All right, so let's look down here in this data form down here. So I've specified, I've uncommented two sets of metadata on my collection. As you can see, I can mouse over and interact with this UI, and it's providing input hints telling me what I need to do to fill in these forms properly, and they don't look too bad either. I also, as you saw, I uncommented all the required field attributes. Now we no longer see bold down here, on the field labels for these particular controls. We still see them up here. That's the built-in default required field indicator. For data form, it's 100% stylable. You can change it to any other visualization that you desire that's appropriate for your business very easily. One other thing that I want to mention is the description viewer. It can also act as a standalone control. You can associate it with any element in your UI that you want. Of course, you can style it any way you want as well using Blend. It's a piece of cake. So you can add input hints to anything. By default, it's pretty easy to add into the data form, as you saw. But the capabilities, there's far more capabilities than you just saw here. Yes?
How do you localize this data?
That is a very good question. Yeah, I don't have a good, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for that. I can certainly find out, though. So let's see how many I 5 minutes left. All right, so the last pattern, okay, it's not the last pattern. Okay, the next pattern that I want to talk about has to do with the action group. The specific patterns that I want to talk about are button groups and visible done buttons. So again, the action category is all about ensuring your users know what to do next and helping them complete tasks fast and efficiently. Grouping buttons together with similar functionality also fits into the natural mappings that I had discussed in the design principles. People can kind of intuit that those buttons probably have similar functionality. It just makes their interactions with the UI a little more fast and efficient, which is always good, especially in business applications. All right, so let's pop back over and take a look. Sorry. All right. So button grouping, we're seeing button grouping here in our data pager. So our paging commands are actually grouped together, which is good. Again, taking advantage of natural mappings. Users are going to logically assume that they probably have similar functionality than they do. They navigate you through the collection. In data form, you're seeing button grouping as well, an edit button and a delete button. And of course, they kind of work together as a group also. They edit items in the collection. Then we also have the command buttons that submit your changes grouped together, the save and the cancel button. Similar functionality. They're doing similar things. One, they're both acting on the data. One is saving the changes you made. Of course, the other is canceling them. All important buttons. Another important thing to call out is the highly prominent done button. That's what you're seeing down here. This would be classified as a highly prominent done button. It's down, so like as the user's reading, interacting with the form, moving through the data, they're starting at the top, reading from left to right, moving from top to bottom. This is the last thing that they're going to see as they're interacting with the form. It's very prominent. It kind of stands out in the UI, helping them complete the task as fast and efficiently as possible. All right. Okay, so this really is the last pattern that I was planning to discuss. Bar graphs, line graphs, scatter graphs, graphs of various sorts help users with data analysis. They help them pull out meaningful information from the data that you're presenting in your business application quickly and efficiently. They don't have to, read all sets, like if they're dealing with a data grid, like they'd have to potentially read all sorts of columns to, pull out meaningful data and analysis from the information. Graphs can just help users pull out this information instantaneously. Humans are visual creatures, and so graphs can actually serve a really good purpose in your UI, depending on what what it is that you're trying to do. Silverlight Toolkit supports charting. It supports these 3 charts here as well as others. And I'm not actually going to have time to code this up, so I'll just show you the finished version, and we can talk a little bit about what I have going on. All right, so I'm just going to run it so you can take a look. Okay, so now we're on the approvals page. And again, on the approvals page, we're just looking at expense reports that have been approved. Okay, the data kind of matches what we had on the in-progress expense reports. Ignore that. So here's where the charting comes into play. Let's say that as a manager or as Karina Black, I want to understand how much I've been spending throughout the year, in my expense reports. Charting can make it really easy to kind of quickly just grok the data. So I'm seeing, wow, in February, oh, that doesn't look so good. I'm seeing in February that, man, I've spent a lot, submitted a lot of expense reports, cost the organization a lot of money, wow. Throughout the rest of the year, though, I'm pretty good. It's very easy to take away this meaningful information using graphing. And I added kind of a fun little animation. This was actually really easy to do. I did it rather quickly. I would have shown you, but I don't have time. It makes it a little more fun, a little more engaging, fun to interact with the data. Of course, the data is useful, exactly what users need. So let's just quickly take a look at what I have going on here, just so you can kind of understand what I'm doing. So I have a grid that contains my chart. It's a line chart. And I'm binding one of the axes to the value and one of the axes to the key. Let's go over to the code behind so that can make more sense. All right, so this is the code behind. This is the show chart animation, or the show chart method. And so what it's doing is I'm creating an observable collection from the data that I have in app.xaml. And then I'm iterating through the collection, and I'm like calculating, adding up all of the expenses, the totals for the month, and then basically adding that month and the expense total into the collection that my chart is going to present to users. So after I've added all that up, I'm calling an animation called show chart, which was that little animation. It was kind of quick and subtle that shot it out at the side of the button, kind of gave it a little bounce in the end. And then when I want to hide chart, because it's a toggle button, I just call hide chart begin, which is another animation. It's very simple. It just fades the graphic away or the chart away. So that's basically what's going on. I'll just run it one more time because I have a few minutes. I think it's fun doing this kind of stuff. It's actually really super easy too. So I have my chart. I know how much I spent. How exciting is that? All right. Okay, so quickly, just key takeaways. There are a core set of design principles when used in conjunction with design patterns. Design patterns are building blocks for applications that are proven the test of time. Also taking advantage of those great attributes to really make your UI stand out from the crowd, a little more engaging for users. And Silverlight 3, all the capabilities in Silverlight 3, all the new features and functionality, all the great new capabilities in Blend and Visual Studio will help you make your business applications have a really great user experience. They'll help increase productivity for your users within your application, reduce the number of errors that your users are encountering when interacting with the UI, help users pull out meaningful data from the application, from the data that they're analyzing, reduce support and training costs, and just overall make them happier, make them not want to check their computer out the window when they're interacting with the UI. All right, so I think that's it. I do have a few resources I'm just going to pop up here so you guys can take a peek. These are some great resources, and I believe you guys are going to all have access to these slides. These are some design patterns. Jennifer Tidwell has a really good book on design patterns. I think Martin has a very good website that covers a lot of design patterns in kind of a different format. A lot of them overlap with what Jennifer has. Of course, Jacob Nielsen and his 10 usability heuristics are very interesting. And Quince just came out with a really interesting interactive Silverlight version of a pattern type application, which is awesome. Check it out. And then also, obviously, you want to check out the Silverlight toolkit because I mentioned some of the controls that I mentioned are in the Silverlight toolkit. Some are in the core. And then I mentioned the Microsoft Silverlight site here, which has Silverlight that you can download. So does anybody have any questions? I can make it available on my blog. I can definitely do that. It's, what is it? I've been so busy, I haven't done anything in quite a while. So my blog is blogs.msdn.com/corrinab. And yeah.
When you were in the double master detail,
Yeah.
you ended up with 2 sets of save cancels. I don't know about your users. My users don't consider that to be a particularly good user experience. They click the wrong save. They don't know what to do. They blah, blah, blah. What users want typically, I find, is what I call the access pattern. And you might hate access, but boy, those guys got it right. You go to a record, you just start editing. If you don't like it, you hit escape. If you want to save, you just go on. You don't hit save, you don't hit cancel, you don't any of that stuff. That's all to make our life easier as developers. So my question is, what do we have in Silverlight to help us build those really great UXs, not 2 sets of save cancels?
Right. So because of the styling, so the question was how, so you're a fan of the access pattern, which doesn't have 2 sets of buttons, and how does Silverlight make designing great patterns such as that easier? It's actually very easy, and you're right, I probably should have done something like that, but I was trying to highlight some of the features and functionality and things overlapped. Because of the great styling capabilities, you can go into Blend and you can remove all of those buttons that are unnecessary very, very easily. You could do it directly in XAML as well. to get the UI exactly as you were just describing. It's a piece of cake.
But then the functionality doesn't work at all. It automatically
You, yeah, so you could have just like one set of save buttons down at the bottom. You could get rid of like you could very easily get rid of the internal set of save buttons. And it could, so I didn't talk about this property, but there's an auto edit property, which I had kind of on the outer data grid, which I set up. You could also do it, I think, what is it, an auto submit property? I can't remember the exact property, which will save your changes automatically. So you can get exactly what you want. And if I had time, I would have showed you. I certainly would have shown you. So any more questions? Yes, do you want to talk into the microphone so everybody, because they're recording it and we'd love to hear you.
Is there a way to have the different forms pop up instead of have everything like side by side like you had it, but be able to click and then have a form pop up onto the screen to where you can do your interactions and then it push back to the previous form?
You could, so the question was, so you want to show only one form at a time. So you want, so what you might want is you might want that original master details, but for popping up that second data form, you might want it to actually fill the UI so the users could focus on that. That's very easy to do. So you would simply have to style the UI. Seriously, Blend is your friend. I'm a designer, and I use Blend all the time. You would just simply have to style the UI so that you can specify in Blend that you want it to fill the available space when it appears. So I had set things up in a series of grids and stack panels. I would probably place that data form at an outermost level, or maybe probably at the outermost grid level based on what you're describing, to get it to fill the UI. It would be very easy to do. Yes?
Hey, if you're designing a really big app and you have a lot of screens, a lot of validation, error messaging, do you do that all in the planning phase beforehand, writing error messages out, or do you go directly into Blend and create that stuff on the fly? Because that's been my issue, making sure that it's consistent. If you got a 100 screen app, all those interactions, how do you manage that framework?
Well, yeah, I think with a bigger application, I think there's going to be with simple applications, you could do something like I've done here, and you probably could do it all in Blend, and maybe some Visual Studio. But a bigger application, I think it's going to require a lot more planning up front, and maybe you are going to have like your error messages as resources. I think it is going to be a little bit more work.
But is that what you would recommend then, like making those resources and then dragging them in afterwards? In terms of writing, validation messages and error messages, you can end up with pages and pages of that stuff. At least I do. And maybe that's a problem, but
constrained input controls.
Yeah.
Don't let your users ever encounter those errors if you can.
Yeah.
Well, I think in that case, I haven't actually thought a lot about that. But I think in that case, you're definitely, you are going to want them as resources, and you're probably going to want to modify those as a separate unit, because that in and of itself is probably a huge task to take on. And I just couldn't imagine like tasks switching back and forth in something like Blend. I don't think it's optimized for doing something like that.
Okay.
In the beginning of building that app, you showed how you can basically completely change the whole style, which was really cool. And maybe I'm not aware of how to do this, but is it possible to change the style according to like what user is logging into your system, or so that if I log in, maybe I have like a green theme, but then you log in and you go to the site and you have a red theme. Is it possible to do that according to user?
That would certainly be possible. I'm trying to, I'd have to like play around with it to like get the specifics. So as a user logs in, like you could.
Almost like a personalization type thing.
You probably have a dynamic resource, and I do it through the code behind.
Okay.
I analyze, the user grab the resources, the application of current type of resources, and throw it in there. And then if all the resources are dynamic, like you have a dynamic, you have a brush, and it has a reference
Yeah, I think it would be very similar. I'm sorry, thank you.
Thanks.
So, right, I've been doing a lot of WPF for a while, and in order to improve the user experience, a lot of our application is, data-driven, using a lot of different services, and some services could take microseconds, some could take, a minute.
Yeah.
And so obviously we had to introduce a lot of asynchronous mechanisms within the application. And a lot of the presentations, though, all these Silverlight presentations, I don't see a bit of any sort of asynchronous code being written. Did I mean that
That's
it's all
me.
under the covers, or I mean, I think another presentation I saw a loading screen that while it was pulling the data. I don't know how that works in Silverlight. I don't know if it's different, but if you could talk to that.
Yeah, I wish. So I'm one of those, because I really do focus on design. I mean, I certainly can code, but to be able to talk intelligently about it, I would have had to have done it recently. I mean, async patterns are used all over the place in Silverlight. Doing something like progress, probably as you saw in that other presentation, it would be very easy to utilize this async pattern, and I could probably figure it out. I just can't pull it out, off the top of my head. Sorry about that. So grab that person who demonstrated it for you. They'll probably know.
I think I just try to make a comments in the Silverlight. The different from WPF is Silverlight doesn't have its own, threading to random. It just uses a UI main thread. That's the thing.
Right. Well,
pay attention.
And well, in WPF
Otherwise,
as well, there's only
really,
one UI thread, and if you do everything on it, then you're blocking the entire UI.
But you have to let the UI thread run through that message. So the message loop got it back, then it's fine. Actually, fine call. But anyway, I have a question. What's the best practice or recommended practice to handle the localization on the Silverlight application side?
So, okay, so I think I heard you right. So what's the best commanding process?
What are your recommended recommended?
Oh, recommended. Oh, what's the recommended process for localization?
Localization, not only the string, those types of things, also the color, because some picture may be very offensive in some culture. Of course, you want to switch culture.
You know what? That is an excellent question. I need to get more educated on that. There's actually somebody sitting right in front of me who knows the answer to that. Probably Brad. I see you there. I don't have a good answer for you, so you can grab me later, and I can probably point you to somebody else, or give me your business card.
Just wait, you guys come up with the answer.
Okay. All right. Sorry. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.